Hello and thank you for joining today's event. Introducing SICSS-Howard Mathematica faculty sponsor Professor Bahiyyah Muhammad. Now I would like to introduce Nanette Coleman. Nanette H. Coleman is a PhD candidate in the Sociology Department at the University of California, Berkeley and UC National Lab Los Alamos Fellow. Her work sits at the intersection of the sociology of culture and organizations and focuses on cybersecurity, surveillance, and privacy in the U.S. context. Specifically, Nanette's research examines how organizations assess risk, make decisions, and respond to data breaches and organizational compliance with state, federal, and international privacy laws. Nanette holds a Master of Public Administration with a specialization in democracy, politics, and institutions from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and both an MA in Economics and a BA in Communication from the University at Buffalo SUNY. A non-traditional student, Nanette's prior professional experience includes local, state, and federal service, as well as work for 2 international organizations and 2 universities. Nanette is also the lead organizer for SICSS-Howard Mathematica.
Thank you all for joining us for this discussion with Professor Bahiyyah Muhammad. I will begin by introducing Professor Muhammad. After Professor Muhammad will offer a general overview of her research trajectory to date, what she has done and is currently doing. From there, we'll spend some time learning about her recent grants and new projects, her new relationship with the Summer Institute in Computational Social Science, Howard Mathematica, and what's to come. Finally, we'll conclude discussing her path to the professoriate. If you've seen our other discussions on this channel, including SICSS at Age 5, Past, Present, and Future, and Bit by Bit with Matt Salgonic, you know that I'm particularly interested in elevating discussions on the topic of diversity in computational social science. Today's discussion will reflect that as well. Let's begin with Dr. Muhammad's bio. Professor Bahiyyah Muhammad is an associate professor of criminology in the Department of Sociology at Howard University. For more than a decade, Dr. Muhammad has conducted research on the children of incarcerated parents and the consequences of parental incarceration on children. Dr. Muhammad has done hundreds of interviews with affected children and parents in the United States, Uganda, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. She has published research on the impact of parental incarceration, from witnessing a parent's arrest by police to the physical and emotional separation resulting from actual incarceration on children, their parents, and familial bonds, as well as children's success stories. Dr. Muhammad is also founding director for the Higher Education and Prison Programming at Howard. Under Dr. Muhammad's leadership, Howard University became the first HBCU to offer award-winning post-secondary education to incarcerated females, males, detained juveniles, and their families simultaneously. To date, Professor Muhammad has spearheaded HEP's courses and innovative programs offered through Howard University Schools of Law, Divinity, Communications, Fine Arts, and the College of Arts and Sciences. To date, approximately 1,000 Howard students, alumni, faculty, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals have participated in classes inside prisons, jails, and detention facilities in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Dr. Bahiyyah Muhammad received her BA in Administration of Justice with a minor in Psychology and Criminology certificate from Rutgers, her MA in Correctional Administration from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and her PhD in Criminal Justice with a specialization on children of incarcerated parents, also from Rutgers. Before we start, I also want to plug Dr. Muhammad's recent TED Talk. If you have not seen it, don't wait. In fact, you may want to pause right now and watch it. Welcome, Dr. Muhammad. It's a pleasure to have you with us today and an honor to have you as one of the 2 founding faculty sponsors for SICSS-Howard Mathematica, the first SICSS at a historically Black college or university.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's just wonderful to hear you actually read my bio. You know, you're doing so much work sometimes. You often don't get the time to look up. So it was nice to hear that coming from someone like yourself. I am honored about this partnership, and I'm very excited to engage in this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Let's jump right into a discussion about your research and your research trajectory. This part of our discussion is meant to offer our listeners a sense of your prior scholarship. We're going to talk a little bit about your future scholarship, things that you're excited about and your connection with SICSS, but let's talk about your past and current work. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've studied in the past and what projects are currently in your pipeline?
Absolutely. I'm very excited that the work that I've done in the past triangulates seamlessly into my current work. I started off doing studies ethnographically as it relates to the lived experiences of Black families around mass incarceration. My interest specifically in that realm was to gain a better understanding of the effects on children of incarcerated parents when I was learning in my doctoral studies a lot about the collateral consequences and the dehumanization and the ostracization and the racism that those individuals that were Black and brown bodies were experiencing during incarceration. One of the things that I saw was missing from all of the data was the voices of the children. And so for me, I was wondering, wow, what do they experience, right? So I started to create these different research questions to explore what those experiences were. And as I started to dig and dig, I identified that there is no national database or federal government or city entity or practitioners that count the numbers of children of incarcerated parents. And so when you think about that, it causes issues around sampling and a frame. And so I found myself piecing together this kind of study in the past, specifically in 2004 and 2005, where I went to the homes of children of incarcerated parents and interviewed them in their bedrooms with the doors closed. And literally, I just wanted their truth. I wanted their narrative to emerge. I also interviewed the caregivers who were considered during the time in the research as the gatekeepers. And these are the individuals that make the decision on if a child should visit an incarcerated parent or not. And so I wanted to get their vantage point as well, because that's a heavy load to lift in terms of raising children, even if they are a part of your family or in the foster system. And so I was digging, all over the place, really trying to uncover more of the research gaps to gain a better understanding around why, if there are such large numbers of individuals that are affected by mass incarceration, and we know that there's a disproportionate number as it relates to Black incarcerated individuals, why are we not looking closer at the offspring of those individuals to help break the intergenerational cycle of incarceration? That study literally led to the work that I do today that centers unapologetically resilience among families of incarcerated individuals. When we look at the data, everything is from this deficit-based perspective, looking at the hardships and the shortcomings and the ways that individuals navigate into the juvenile justice system and then into the adult system. And I definitely think those are important components, but we must pivot now. And a lot of my work recently titled Flipping the Script is looking at how Black families, specifically young children, succeed in spite of mass incarceration, and really trying to resist the concept of telling their stories that revolve only around their parents' incarceration, when in fact, my recent study that looks at success, resilience, and triumphs among children of incarcerated parents identified that 80% of the population of the youth that I interviewed across the nation had no interactions with the criminal justice system, not arrest, not detention, not incarceration. And so when we think about the super predator myth and the ways that we talk about this population, unfortunately, we have not done our due diligence in really sitting down and allowing for their resilience, success, empathy, and faith to just shine through. And so my recent study allowed for me to interview children who experience parental incarceration in their life or currently and are living within the United States of America. I looked specifically at those that were 18 years and older and really looked to identify the pathways to success. When we think about a deficit-based perspective, one of the things that it does very well is it raises a red flag and allows individuals to know how to discriminate against you or how to put you in a box. But when we look at resilience and success, what I found was that we're able to identify a pathway. And therefore, we're able to give guidance and due diligence to those younger individuals that are coming up in these same experiences so that they don't fall into the same cracks, or that they are able to advocate that much more on their own behalf. I just recently completed a white paper on that. I'm extending the study now, going into year 2 and year 3. And the things that I'm finding is absolutely astronomical in the sense, because oftentimes, believe it or not, I have a lot of heated conversations with individuals, specifically practitioners, around stories of success and the disbelief around it. Almost assuming that it is a myth that these Black children that I interview will succeed through poverty, through racism, and through parental incarceration. And so for me, it's very important that we begin to tell these stories, because these youth, oh, wow. I mean, the things that I've been able to identify, the research doesn't even come close to it. And so the research is completely outdated and doesn't connect from a criminological perspective to the findings that I'm identifying with the children. And so I'm going to continue digging. I plan to explore this area even more. I want to look more into HBCUs. A lot of the youth that I interviewed went to HBCUs as a mean of self-support and to build their concept of liberation and self-worth. Many of them majored in sociology and criminology and in the social sciences as a way to begin to study their experience as opposed to shying away from it. And it literally gave them an opportunity to own their story, class after class, looking at the landscape of theories and literature as a way to embed their lived experience. I mean, very critical, very just so thoughtful in the realm of deciding on what school you want to go to. And I'm just like, this information juxtaposed against the school to prison pipeline could ultimately change the trajectory of the future of many children who only see themselves in the media as being the next individual to fill a prison bed.
Can you tell us a little bit about your international work? Does that connect with, did I see you had or have a fellowship with the State Department?
Yes, I served as a foreign affairs officer looking specifically at the civil rights for children across the nation. For me, that position was an opportunity to look at the human rights perspectives around the lack of advantages that we provide for youth. For example, right now, when we think about children of incarcerated parents, there is a Bill of Rights for children of incarcerated parents, and it has things that are connected to having a lifelong relationship with your parent, being made aware of what's happening during the criminal legal process that your parent is exposed to, being able to hug your parent, being able to engage in conversations, being able to know about decisions that are made about you as it relates to your parent. And so at the State Department, it really gave me an opportunity to dig in across the nation among the nuances and so many of the disadvantages and stories of deficit-based perspectives of children all across the nation. And literally, it really refined my skills as it relates to policy and practice. I mean, all of the work that we do and the research that we envision, if we are not disseminating the research findings very largely, but also tapping into the practitioners to make sure that there are programs and policies in place. I mean, we are almost doing these longitudinal studies, very expensive studies in vain. During that position, it really gave me an opportunity to understand the scope of the issue outside of the United States of America. And oftentimes when it's not done right in the United States, it is replicated in other countries, and that goes untapped. So when we talk about mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex, many individual countries across the nation follow suit. And although they don't incarcerate as much as we do in the United States, they are falling into those traps. And so a lot of my work in that space was to uncover places outside of the United States that actually get it right. What programs are beneficial for youth and for children? what ways can governments work in unison with families that are affected by mass incarceration? And what ways can we show up as university stakeholders to be of service to communities that we service and that our universities rest within?
Can you tell us a little bit about, is it HEP? And how that came to be. You're the founder of the Howard Initiative that I mentioned earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. HEP stands for Higher Education in Prison. And really, one of the things that drew me to Howard University was the need to implement a criminal justice program. When I came to Howard University in 2013, I was the only instructor on campus that was trained to go inside of carceral facilities and teach college education courses. And so in the nation's capital, reaching out to the only institution that had no college programming at all. And so, you know, for me, higher education in prison, we know from decades of large data that consistently it reduces recidivism. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And although my work goes beyond increasing and reducing recidivism and looks more at liberation and emancipation and fighting anti-Black racism through the readings and the instructors that actually enter these spaces, I think that we have to be honest about the importance that HBCUs play as it relates to Black individuals. When you think about the incarcerated population being disproportionately Black and then followed by brown individuals, the university programs that were going into carceral spaces did not look like the Howard universities or the University of the District of Columbia. And even when you found programs going in, it was certificate bearing. And so it really doesn't see the essence of the educational capacities outside of degrees and scholarships among incarcerated individuals. When I came to Howard University, I remember boarding a bus of students, about 70 students on a charter bus, and taking them to a correctional facility in New Jersey and in New York, where I'm from and where I had connections, because it was unbelievable to me that we were so close to the detention facilities and to the prisons and were not engaging. And as I started to reach out to the facilities, the pushback was just real. And so being a Black woman, being a Black scholar and an educator, I am seen more familiar to those individuals as an incarcerated person than I do as a scholar. And so working through Howard University with the phenomenal students along the last 7 years has given us an opportunity to expand educational programming in the nation's capital, where they have more college programs than any district or any jurisdiction across the nation. And that was started through our hands at Howard University. So I'm very honored about that privilege, but even more grateful that when individuals engage with HBCUs on the outside and on the inside, it is very transformative. And many of the individuals, more than 80% of those who participated in programming, have not been incarcerated again in the last 7 years. And so we know that the programming works. Many individuals are applying to universities and colleges on the outside. I was able to start an organization called Jammy Sisterhood LLC, and it really is to empower Black women and higher education in prison, and literally getting more individuals inside of carceral spaces that look like us, being the students, the instructors, and the leaders, to be able to help individuals as they begin to think about re-entering Black communities. And so really working towards racial equity as it relates to those individuals that have access to incarcerated populations to be of service.
So as I've gotten to know you, one of the things that's stood out to me is just how just incredibly insightful and kind and giving you are of your time. And I feel like, you know, beyond my admiration, you've received a lot of admiration from foundations and for your work. So alongside being a fan, I know there are lots of foundations right now that are fans of your work. Can you tell us a little bit about the grants you've received and how those connect to your work going forward?
Absolutely. I am honored that many individuals, out of the respect that they have for the Howard University, really are beginning to bridge the divide between scholarship from Black scholars as it engages with changing and shifting the narrative. And so many individuals have reached out over the years in terms of being interested in the work that I'm doing, the research that I'm doing. Recently, with the realities of what we're facing with around Black communities and the injustices around white supremacy and anti-Black racism, many individuals are now beginning to put their money where their mouth is and are supporting tremendously to HBCU faculty and to the universities. I was able to secure a grant through the Center for Advancing Opportunity, which is through the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, very historically known for working with HBCUs as a way to highlight the scholarship of Black scholars. I've been doing work around children of incarcerated parents for many years, and they wanted to see that elevated, levitated, and making its way out there as it relates to the experts across the divide. And so that particular fellowship was a wonderful opportunity because it allowed me to be able to fund 8 scholars on the doctoral level, on the master's level. And for me, mentorship on the undergraduate level to research methodology is more important than anything. And so I was able to bring in some of the undergrads as well. Recently, we also spearheaded a grant that looks at voting practices among Black residents of Washington, D.C., and that is through the Knight Foundation. This is one of the first partnerships with a historically Black college and university where we were literally going into the different wards in the nation's capital to identify voting practices and misinformation. A lot of individuals talk about it and they talk about the different things that happen. What does it mean for the Black community to vote, to not be interested, and how they go about making those decisions? And what does it mean for the intergenerational cycles of individuals as it relates to voting? The most recent grant that I received, the largest of them all that I worked on with faculty across the university, specifically the PI, Dr. Nikki Teller in the history department, was for the Social Justice Consortium. We recently received $5 million from the Mellon Foundation for the Just Futures grant. And it is just a game changer, working with HBCUs across the nation to be able to create a social justice certificate. And with that social justice certificate, it will allow for incarcerated individuals, formerly incarcerated individuals, Title I high school graduates like myself, low-income residents, senior citizens, veterans, individuals that are homeless, and those individuals that are often erased and not considered. It will give them the opportunity to get 6 university credits for free. And so as I think about the ways of challenging anti-Black racism and thinking about the ways of promoting educational equity, not just in prisons, but also in low community high schools and in senior citizen homes and in places where many individuals never bring the ivory tower, it really challenges who is worthy of education and who is worthy of being the educator. That grant is a phenomenal opportunity just to be able to empower those individuals to solve the solutions in their communities. You know, not waiting for handouts, not waiting for someone to pick them up or tell them to be picked up from their own bootstraps, but literally being educated and empowered to be able to solve the solutions in communities. And if we all hold hands with this grant across the nation, it allows for us an opportunity to see really, really systemic change.
I am so excited about what's happening at Howard University, what's happening in the sociology department there, and especially about our Howard SICSS Mathematica relationship with you as one of our founding faculty sponsors. So I guess my next question is, as an ethnographer and who has their finger on the pulse of so many of these issues and can provide such incredible contextual knowledge on these cutting edge issues that are especially important to the Black community, what next, and how does computational social science fit into what next? And also, are there any data sets or things that you'd love to get your hands on
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, this interview is so much fun. And I really enjoy talking about, triangulating these pieces and kind of pulling them together. What's next is computational social sciences. I am really interested in finding large data that allows me the opportunity to connect the contextualized knowledge and information that I have to the statistical analysis. Oftentimes when you talk to practitioners, the contextualizing is great, but individuals need the hard numbers. Wanting to just be able to say across the span of thousands of individuals, oftentimes millions of individuals that are interviewed in a data set, systemically being able to identify how racism finds itself in the data. I think that is the piece that I want to begin to emerge into. And that's why I'm so excited about the partnership with Howard University and bringing this initiative to the students, junior faculty, and those individuals that are looking for data sets to be able to play around with, to explore, but also to be able to identify ways of pushing forward social justice agendas through the particular research. And I think that's one of the things that we haven't seen. Some of the data sets that I'm interested in are the fragile families data set, really wanting to mash that together with different data sets to merge them to look at race as it relates to children of incarcerated parents specifically. Many times when we talk about the population, we think about it as a monolith, and we think that it's this one kind of general population as opposed to breaking it up as it relates to the different races. But now when we think about the time that we're facing, one of the major findings that I identified in my recent study on success and resilience, when I compared the white subjects to the Black subjects, was racism. There were similarities that were experienced, but by far and large, the large majority in school, in work, in family, and in everyday life, these individuals were experiencing racism. I'm wondering if in the large data sets, we're able to identify these different nuances. For many years, we've had many publications that are coming out on, the fragile families data in the top journals. But one of the things we've been really shy about is anti-Black racism and really looking at racial inequities a lot closer, not as a way to tarnish and talk bad on the population, but in order to illuminate success and resilience and identify why it's so important to operationalize and pull out these race and gender dynamics. And so what's next for me is looking at those large data sets, not only co-hosting this event at the university, but being a participant. I am interested in hearing from the phenomenal speakers that are secured. I am interested in really looking and engaging with a lot of the graduate students that I'm mentoring as they grapple with the challenges of big data. Computational social sciences, we don't talk about it enough. And when we talk about it, we don't look at it in the sense of Black excellence. And so bringing this to Howard University literally gives us an opportunity to see our students at work and to be able to utilize their skills and professional development in ways that oftentimes is left out of big data. And so I am just excited about this new direction, which opens me up to be able to work with more students. Oftentimes we get students from all across the African diaspora that have qualitative components, quantitative components, some that are interested in this area. And now with this partnership, it gives us the opportunity to explore that a lot deeper, but more importantly, to have the resources to back the students.
And for those of you who are new to the Summer Institute in Computational Social Science, you spend 2 weeks at either the main host site or a partner site. SICSS-Howard Mathematica is a partner site for 2021. And over the course of the 2 weeks, you're introduced to all that is cool about computational social science. That exact definition comes from the founders. What is computational social science? Everything that is cool. And you'll learn to analyze all sorts of different types of data, including the fragile families data set. We have a long history of students participating in SICSS over the summer and working on the fragile families data set, and quite a few publications have come out of that. So I'm excited to see what publications of yours, Dr. Muhammad, and Howard, come out of this work. And I think the idea that you as a scholar who focuses on Black excellence is at the center of Black excellence, Howard University, is so wonderful. So we're heading into the final parts of our discussion. What I would love to know, one of my favorite questions to ask faculty that end up taking a seat on my couch here virtually, is to learn more about your path to the professoriate. So many of our students, so many Black people, students are, is this a career I want? How does someone get there? So for the undergrad that stumbles across this video, for the master's student that stumbles across this video, for the PhD student like myself who has moments where they're like, why am I doing this? Can you tell us how you found your way to this career, how you knew you wanted a life of the mind, and things that we should consider if we're considering following in your footsteps?
Thank you so much for these phenomenal questions. They are so needed. I would say to the undergraduate student, to the graduate student, to the individual in high school in a low-income community where they're often being told, go and get a trade, college is not for you. You may, want to go to work. I would tell them to not listen to the naysayers, to go for it. Going to a Title I high school, I was told often that I should go into work, that college was not for me, that it would be too difficult, that it would be unaffordable, and all of the deficit-based perspectives that individuals give. I want to remind everyone that's watching the resilience of Black scholars and of Black individuals, and really let individuals know that the resilience that rests inside of you because of your ancestry and because of your lived experience is warranted, and you should tap into it. You should definitely tap into it. When the heart desires something, I would say don't allow anyone to push that away. I would definitely say to my undergraduate students, jump into research. On the undergraduate level, use your faculty as so much more than just your instructor. I mean, oftentimes I am underutilized, believe it or not. As busy as I am, many of my undergraduate students, they don't utilize me to my full capacity. And oftentimes I'm yearning for just that. At the end of the day, in front of you are PhDs, JDs, PsyDs, EDDs, all of the alphabet soup, basically stating that they have done their due diligence. They've read, they've thought, they've written, they have explored inside of the academy, outside of the academy, they have lived. And so they are so much more than just instructors. During office hours, have conversations. Google your instructors outside of ratemyprofessor.com, which will determine how you finesse a class. Literally learn about their data and what ways it may speak to you. Try to become an undergraduate researcher. I was a Ronald E. McNair scholar. And so it literally gave me an opportunity to learn research, to understand it in the summer, to work underneath, PhD scholars that were Black and that were brown and that looked like me. And for the first time, I was able to see an individual having a PhD and being Black. I didn't know anything about that when I started college. I didn't go in as an undergrad saying, oh, I'm going to be this researcher. What it really was is that I was looking for resources during the summer session because I didn't want to go back to the hood. I didn't want to have to move back from the Ivory Tower College campus in New Brunswick and have to go all the way back to Newark or to East Orange, where the lights were going to be off, the heat may be off one time, you don't have the cafeteria to eat. For me, it was about my livelihood. And the Ronald E. McNair program would give you $1,200 during the summer to read books and to write. Absolutely. I signed up for it. I did the letters of recommendation. I worked with some of the upperclassmen to learn more about it. And I put myself out there. I wasn't good at research methodology. I didn't fully understand it. The one thing that I had going for me was my social capital. Put me in front of whomever, and I'm going to be able to present whatever needs to be presented. and give that kind of passion and esteem behind anything that I do. I started there. And that was some of my training, just living and growing up in the hood. You have to know how to present yourself and show up. Otherwise, you're going to be the one that loses out. And at the end of the day, those skills were good and worthy to get me on the path to the PhD. Being able to ask questions, being able to open my eyes. I hadn't realized that in these communities, when I moved in to East Orange from Bergen County, a completely rich jurisdiction, living in communities with individuals that didn't look like me, my eyes as an ethnographer were born there. And if I did not explore the path to something that made me uncomfortable, something that I wasn't fully aware of, that I hadn't mastered, I would not be where I am today. I tell those individuals on the graduate level, keep on going. There were many days and many times where I cried my eyes out. There were times where I spent the night, in my office on campus, reading article after article that didn't make sense, but I would not give up. I'm going to continue to read and take notes until it clicks. It wasn't until I got into the field that the PhD in my trajectory lit up. The light at the end of the tunnel, I could see it. And guess what? I could feel it. I started feeling the warmth of that light come closer as I started to engage with incarcerated individuals. As the experience got real to me, it started to connect to my life growing up. It started to make sense. The theories started to look a whole lot different after I did 5 to 10 interviews, because now the theories started to speak to me in a different way because my hands had touched the data. So please continue to go, keep going. Remind yourself that celebrating is great. I made sure that I celebrated with ice cream, getting my nails done, blasting my music from the campus to my home, which was only a 10-minute ride, but that was my way to celebrate completing a 50-page article and writing up my notes on it. Don't punish yourself by making it so difficult that you bamboozle yourself into thinking this is what it's about. No, what ends up happening is on the tail end of it, when you get into the academy, you are going to drain your students in the same way, because there's no difference than a dead man walking than a dead person in the grave. Don't allow the data and the research to kill you by its negativity. For me, I was reminded to make sure that I stayed in the community. Why? Because it was the light. Being connected to individuals reminded me of the racism in all of the literature that I was reading, and how Black and brown individuals were less than, and they were not able to make it, and that they had a greater likelihood of going to prison. But the research questions didn't triangulate with the reality of what they were asking. But it wasn't until I got the PhD that I could finally challenge it. So you have to do the work to be able to stand up and engage with the wolves. It is survival of the fittest, and there's a lot that you will jump over. There are many hurdles, but you must continue to go on. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon. For those individuals that are interested in the path to the professorate, in my advice, you hear it. It was challenging. It was very difficult. It was very lonely at times. It was very isolating, but I continued to go on because I wanted to be the face that my students saw, that they could resonate with, but also that would energize them. So I wanted to be that face in the classroom through mentorship, through work, through research assistantships that remind students you could actually do it. And so I only engage in research that I enjoy. I don't engage in work that I'm not interested in really, really wanting to know what the answer to the question is. I'm not asking a question just for a question's sake. I'm not interviewing and sitting with anyone, not one subject, where I'm wasting their time and my time in terms of the findings. When I look at success and resilience among children of incarcerated parents, it is because when I go into prisons and I teach, I want to remind them, hot off the press, that their children love them, and that as soon as they touch ground outside, it is an opportunity to get it right. And I'm there to help. I'm there to help bringing credit. So now you have a transcript that you can show, and maybe that will help your family be reminded that you're not only the crime that you committed, but you are the individual that God created. And so for me, this means everything, because there is nothing higher than a PhD. And I always want to remind individuals of that. There is no degree higher. So when you think about white supremacy, when you think about anti-Black racism, when you think about all of the inequities, you may not be able to go as high as you want in other realms, but in education, you can go to the top. And the great thing about that is my PhD is used as a ladder. I climb up and I climb down to let people know how to get up and down. And so it is all about breaking down the knowledge and the information that I have and dissecting it in a way that a bird does when it feeds its children so that they can live with just information. If the research doesn't make sense to you, if you have to sell your soul to write something, to gain tenure, to be secure, to go against your own community, this is not the occupation for you. You literally are using fact in order to liberate and emancipate populations that have been erased from society. And if you think about it like that, you could keep going. It gives you energy to continue to go on that path to success. And that success is not going to come from achieving the PhD. It's not going to come from getting the master's. It's going to come from what you do with it and how you give back and help other individuals. In Howard, we pride ourselves on truth and service. And so we find the truth through research, through our expertise, and then we become of service to it. How do the findings then create programs or classes and ways to be able to help the population move that much forward? And when you help others, you help yourself. That would be my advice.
I am continuously blown away by you, and I know that the McNair program is proud of you, Howard is proud of you, Rutgers is proud of you, the entire state of New Jersey, the state of New York. You're just a force, and I feel so fortunate that we get a chance to have even the tiniest bit of your light this summer, and I know that I personally took a lot away from what you just said, and I'm going to watch this video again and again and again, because we all have those days when we're asking why we're doing this. And you've given me lots of food for thought, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you, Associate Professor, about your path to tenure. You brought up passion in research, and it reminds me of a colleague of mine from Berkeley Sociology, a classmate, Zawadi Rux. And I know she has a piece about passion-based decision-making when it comes to your research pipeline, but she also has a recent piece in Inside Higher Education on the inequities of the tenure track system, specifically focused on people of color. And I imagine it's a different conversation when we're talking about HBCUs than we are about PWIs, and I want to acknowledge that. But getting tenure is hard. So I'd love to know more about what it took to get there and what it affords you now.
Oh, wow. These questions, they're getting better and better. The tenure process is very difficult. It challenges you on every realm of what you have. Like, if you think that getting the degree was a challenge, this is times 1,000. And that would be an undercut. There are numerous levels in which you have to achieve. And I think regardless of if you're at a HBCU or if you're at a predominantly white institution, these are categories that you have to publish. You have to get grants. You have to do good teaching across the long term, not that one class that's phenomenal, but every single class, every class of 100 students, 20 students, 10 students, or 7 students that are then evaluating you in terms of individuals and your colleagues reading that. Professional development. When you think about all of these sort of components, you still have to have time to be able to take care of refining your skill and your craft. For me, this was a huge conversation in my family. So I went on the tenure track strategically. I pulled my dad together, I pulled my husband together, my children, my brothers and sisters, and I talked about what it was going to mean to go to a HBCU and be on the tenure track. And one of the things that I knew for sure was that I wanted my people to be judging me, regardless of how hard it was going to be. I wanted to be home. I wanted to be at the Mecca. I wanted to be on the hilltop, because I knew being slapped around, being pushed to the side, being watched with a hawk's eye for an entire 5 years in terms of productivity, I thought that if I perform for the rest of the world, at least I could perform for my students and for those individuals at the university that look like me. They deserve to see me struggle. They deserve to see my sweat. And so I was strategic about selecting Howard University. I was also very strategic about centering my family. Mm. I read the book, and many individuals, I always, when I mentor, talk about it, how not to, the Black Man's Guide to Not Losing Your Soul on the TenYear Track. Mm. I read that book from front to back about 20 times.
Writing that one down. Thank you.
That is, when I tell you, it really talks about not selling your soul. Oftentimes you go in and it's about publishing, it's about doing, all of these checks and balances, and then you forget about yourself. You forget about who you are. And when you forget about who you are for 7 years, you literally become a master of somebody else. And sometimes there's no way around it. And I knew for sure if anybody deserves the fruit of my labor in terms of getting a PhD, it is my family first, and then for sure my community, and then the university where you achieve it. And so for me, it meant that I wasn't going to push my husband to the side in a new marriage. I wasn't going to push my children to the side. I wasn't going to forget about who I was and where I come from. And so as a family, we talked about ways of centering the work. And so one of the new studies that I conducted as I started on the TenYear track was my role around mothering in the field. My first publication on the TenYear track was Mothering from the Field, the impact of motherhood on site-based research. And literally, I got an opportunity to be, the first editor of this co-edited anthology of wonderful, phenomenal women from across the nation that carry their babies and family in tow. And literally what the book was doing was challenging white supremacy, challenging this notion that the single lone white researcher male can go into the field, and when he collects data, it's worthy of being analyzed and it's considered data. But the Black sister that goes into Africa with her husband and her 2 children, that's more so like play because you're too close to the information. And what I wanted individuals to understand is that when I took my babies to Africa and when I took my husband to Africa, it allowed us to write a co-authored piece in this book, but it also allowed us to merge our work where I did the interviews. He's an ethnographer and does photography. So he had an opportunity to capture the pictures that are then published inside of the book. It allowed for our marriage to be united. So on the TenYear track, all of my projects were about love. It was about resilience. It was about uplifting my family and making sure that my daughters and now my son have an opportunity to really see who I am as a Black woman scholar, but as an individual and specifically their mom. I did not want to be on the TenYear track where I'm spending these long hours at the university. My family doesn't know what's going on. I bring my children into the prisons. And so every summer I had an opportunity to study prisons across the world. We lived in Dubai for 3 months. We lived in Africa for 3 months. We've lived in Asia for 3 months, studying the prison system. And as I conducted my interviews with the children, they met my kids. And that made me not just a researcher, not just an individual that's coming in that's not objective enough. It made me an insider. So a lot of these women, as I nursed my daughter, because she was only 1 year old at the time in Africa, the women around the villages saw me not as a Yankee, not as this American woman who is, Black on the outside, but really white, as they see individuals that travel because Black bodies aren't going into Africa in the numbers that we should be. They saw me as a mother. They saw me as a Black warrior. They saw me as a matriarch of my family only because I nursed my daughter in the middle of the village during an interview. And that picture was captured by my husband and now is a part of the book. So when I think about TenYear, I thought about love and I thought about projects that I could engage in that would challenge the white supremacy that's in the TenYear process. And I didn't want to challenge it while I was on the track. I wanted to challenge it after I succeeded. And my story for individuals is a story of love. Your TenYear process tells a story of your life. When I did my application for TenYear, which took me about a year just to put it together and to pull all of the pieces together, it was so beautiful because the person that I saw on paper, I respected. I respected. And so at the end of the day, it gave me an opportunity to have a mirror reflection. And that's what I do through the Dr. Muhammad experience. When I came and got on the TenYear track, I created an opportunity that allowed me to live my dreams out loud. And I wanted to be a huge lover, a lover of truth, a lover of justice, a lover of self, a lover of everything Black, of Black excellence. And that meant my classrooms were radicalized. That meant that pedagogy took me in the community. It took the entire university into the community. It bridged the divide between the DC natives and the Washingtonians and the university, where there were issues, you know, across many years. It allowed me to bond my family, to have my daughters come into a correctional facility for the closing ceremony and meet the children of the incarcerated students that I'm spending 3 hours every week with, meant everything to me, because my life and the TenYear track is a story. And so I looked at it in that sort of fashion. And although it was difficult, I didn't do it alone. I did it with my husband and his support and his help, supporting all of my work and being, you know, the media behind everything that I was doing to make sure these stories were getting out and that the world could see the message that I was giving, even though as a Black woman, I was being erased from a lot of these spaces as the larger white universities started to come in. But we captured the story, not only for ourselves and for our children and their legacy, but for the world. And Howard University allowed me to do that. It was definitely a challenge, but I made sure that everything triangulated. And that would be the advice that I have for individuals. My classes were connected to my research. It was connected to the ways I engaged with the family. So even if we were in Africa for 3 months, one of the months we're doing research, the second month we're analyzing data, and the last month we're shopping and eating and exploring an entire city as a family. At the same time that I was working on my book for the TenYear track and all of the articles that I had in the children's books for children of incarcerated parents and this huge packet that I presented to the university, I was also working on a book with my husband for my children. And what we did without them knowing was pack a suitcase of, you know, regal gowns. And as we were in the sand dunes in Namibia and as we were in the mountains in Dubai, we would dress them in these beautiful gowns and they would run around and play. My husband would capture beautiful, phenomenal pictures. And I would analyze the pictures and write a story behind it. And so when they are 21 years of age, when they are old enough to watch this video and to be able to see, that will be a gift to them for their wedding or when they're 21, so that they have the story of love that the world doesn't have a chance to see because they're not at their vantage point. They're not in this house. And so when I think about the TenYear track, I kept it outside of my home and I made sure that I divided anything that was negative and left it outside of the door and only brought in positivity that could feed the family and grow the family. And as a result of that, it kept my spirits high. It kept my energy well. It allowed me to be able to go back to my hood. So it wasn't like, oh, well, you leaving, you're out of sign, you're out of mind. Now I'm providing college credits for the first time to the universities and schools in the town that I graduated from, creating a pipeline from the high school, impoverished high schools, to the HBCU, giving credit to the incarcerated, giving credit to their children, and giving credit to the community. Is it a model of family that allowed me to be successful on the TenYear track, and now I'm replicating it everywhere.
Thank you so much for giving us even the slightest glimpse into the Muhammad experience. I dream of sitting in on one of your classes. I once again blown away by you. So appreciative that you joined us today. And I want to thank everyone for watching. We're going to put up a resource slide now. And I want to encourage you to visit our website, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and email us. But most important, please apply. Application is due on March 31st. Make sure you are in the room where it happens and you get to be part of the Muhammad experience and SICSS-Howard Mathematica. Thank you all so much for joining us.